All right, I'd like to go ahead and call the Oversight Panel for School Facilities Committee meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Reese? Mr. Delgado?
Here.
Ms. Bybee?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Lucy? Ms. Herman? Mr. Ivory?
Here.
Mr. Diss? Ms. Bunkowski? Ms. Cardinal? And Chair Solara.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, that'll take us to item 2.01, approval of the minutes for June 4th, 2020, meeting of the Oversight Panel for School Facilities. I'll look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Anderson, second by Herman. Is there any public comment on this since it is an action item?
No.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries unanimously. Item 2.02 is discussion and possible action to approve the draft letter to the Legislative Council Bureau. With this, I'll turn it over to Mr. Etchart.
Thank you very much. Pete Etchart, Chief Operating Officer. So based on state statute, every 2 years before July 1st of every even-numbered year, the Oversight Panel for School Facilities needs to prepare written recommendations for the financing and the cost for new construction, design, and maintenance of repairs for school facilities. And you have a draft letter in your packet that I've provided and has been reviewed by the chairman. And I'll take any questions or comments you have on the letter.
All right, are there any questions, comments for Mr. Etchart on the letter? All right, this is an action item. Is there any public comment on this?
Yes, Mr. Church?
Are we on? Wrong button. Sorry. Good afternoon, Jeff Church. I'm a trustee for the Washoe County School District, but the views expressed today are mine. I believe that my comments are appropriate for this particular agenda item. If not, please stop me and I'll come back for the next one. I've appeared here before, but again, it's a little confusing, the two different panels, but it's time to stop bonding and stop building for now. We are less than 30 days before we get a new superintendent. In deference to the new superintendent, I think we need to stop making any decisions on multi-million-dollar projects. I understand the letter has to go in, but in deference to the new superintendent and to the rising building costs, I think there's a time where we have to stop and take a look and say, wait a minute, is this the appropriate time to do all these things? If you happen to read the CAFIR, also known as the audit, also known as the ACFR, the actual occupancy of schools is about 75%. Now, there's some misalignment there. Some schools are overcrowded, some schools are less than crowded. But whether it's high school, elementary, or middle school, we're at about 75% capacity. So we're not over capacity. And again, there are some alignment things. The cost of building has gone way sky high. We all think, well, I can't speak for you, but in my opinion and the opinion of many, we're going to see a recessionary trend. We're going to see the supply chain get evened out. We're going to see costs go down potentially. Nobody can predict the future. But in view of all that, I think there's a time and a place where we got to say stop. No more bonding for now. No more building for now. Let's wait for the new superintendent. Let's wait for things to calm down. And again, the views are mine. I certainly appreciate your time and listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
No.
All right. With that, I will bring it back to the board. Any comments, concerns, motion potentially on this letter?
Move to approve the draft letter to Legislative Council Bureau. Second.
All right, I've got a motion by Anderson, second by Delgado. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Takes us on to item 2.03 is presentation, discussion, and possible approval of a resolution concerning the submission of Washoe County Oversight Panel for School Facilities by Washoe County School District, Nevada, of a proposal to issue general obligations in one series or more in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $298,515,000 for the construction, expanding, improving, and equipping school facilities within the district. Mr. Mathers, I believe, or maybe, yeah, Mr. Mathers will give this one. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer. Good afternoon. One of the statutory duties of the Oversight Panel for School Facilities is to approve issuance of general obligation bonds backed by property taxes, which we call in the state of Nevada for school districts rollover bonds. We have no existing authority to issue general obligation bonds currently. We're kind of stuck until we do get authority to issue additional bonds. So there's a four-step process basically for the issuance of these rollover bonds. First, the Board of Trustees has to request this panel and the Debt Management Commission for approval of the issuance of those bonds. The second step is this step, your approval of these rollover bonds issuance. Third step is approval by the Debt Management Commission. And then once that happens, we would go back to the Board of Trustees in a fourth step for a bond resolution, and then and only then can we issue these rollover bonds. So again, the authority to issue rollover bonds is granted in NRS. As you can see, the Oversight Panel has to approve them, which I just kind of went over. And just to remind you on the next slide, rollover bonds are paid by a portion of the property taxes we all pay on real and personal property. Our debt rate is 38.85 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So of the 364, 38.85 cents goes to payment of debt service on our rollover bonds. For fiscal year 23, we are projecting $76 million approximately in those revenues. Those funds are always segregated in a separate debt service fund, so they never go into our general fund. They cannot be used for school district operations. They can only be used to support debt or pay-as-you-go projects funded by these property taxes. Currently, we have a little over $500 million of outstanding debt with debt service of approximately $64 million. So as we'll talk about in a few slides, there's certainly capacity to issue more debt, but again, we have to go through a process where various bodies confirm our ability to cover that debt. So we are proposing just under $300 million of new rollover bonds, $298,500,000. And we are combining a couple years worth of issuances when we go to the Debt Management Commission. So we anticipate issuing those bonds over multiple series over the next 3 fiscal years if they are approved by all those bodies. And basically what those bonds go towards are a number of projects that you previously approved in our 5-year capital improvement plan. So you'll remember our 5-year CIP, which is actually later on in the docket here as well, included the projects you see on this slide, multiple years of our capital renewal program, and then the first 2 years of our core school investment program, where we'll be doing some very significant projects to renovate, rehabilitate, or build or rebuild existing schools in our core areas. So debt financing was an integral part of the resources in that capital improvement program, and specifically these rollover bonds that we're now asking your approval for. One thing I want to make clear is that if there are changes to the CIP and the Board of Trustees chooses not to do any of these projects for whatever reason, we are not obligated to issue this debt. This is just authorization to enable us to issue that debt. So there can be changes over time, but again, this is the second step we need to take in order to give us that ability to issue debt. On the next slide then is a comparison of our projected revenues. So again, we are budgeting $76 million plus in 2023. And then you can see kind of our projections in that first column. We kind of stopped at $86 million because we don't have to go any further in terms of projections. You can see our outstanding debt service, and then the total proposed debt service of these $298.5 million of new bonds. So you can see in the next column the total debt service combined between the proposed bonds and current outstanding debt service. And then the last column shows you our coverage or margin of our revenues over our debt service. So we start with a coverage factor of 1.09 in the current year, and then 1.10 next fiscal year, and then it climbs from there. And the reason why it kind of climbs is shown in the next slide. So not only do we anticipate property tax revenues to continue to increase, and that growth rate of that revenue has been strong based on new development in the county, but you can also see in those blue bars the outstanding rollover bonds we have. And many of those bonds are maturing and being redeemed over the next 10 years. So our debt profile is falling, our total debt is falling, which gives us the capacity to issue many more general obligation rollover bonds in the future. So we've got very strong coverage if you go out 3, 4, 5 years and continuing on in the future. So we don't see any issue at all in covering our debt service requirements as we've kind of laid out in the current 5-year CIP. So with that, we are asking for your approval of the attached resolution prepared by Bond Counsel, whereby you would approve the issuance of property tax pledge general obligation bonds not to exceed $298,515,000. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Mathers on this item? No? All right. With that, I'll see if there's any public comment.
There is not.
All right, bring that back to the board. I am open to a motion.
Chairman, I move to approve the 2022 Washoe County Oversight Panel Resolution, thereby approving the issuance of property tax pledged general obligation bonds not to exceed $298,515,000.
Second.
I've got a motion by Delgado, a second by Herman. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. That'll take us on to item 3.01, which is public comment. Is there any public comment or general public comment?
There is not, sir.
All right, thank you. 3.02, next meeting announcement. I think that's probably to be determined. Is that correct, Mr. Searcy?
That's correct, at minimum 2 years from today.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we will go ahead and adjourn the Oversight Panel for School Facilities Committee meeting.